All right, what's going on, boys and girls? So we are here finally with your questions. We got about 8 or 9 questions on this, a few more, but we'll probably do another one. Let's get to 5,000 and we'll get there. So first up, bad. So your question was kind of an interesting interpretation. How would a Brainlet fork some distro, change the name, wallpaper, make it an ISO image, and call it a day? Short version, download any distro and make an ISO backup. That's legit what I do. I use Salient OS on 2 of my machines, and it's literally an ISO image that I keep backed up. It has all the programs that I use, and that's just what I do. Like, that's my suggestion. Other people will probably tell you to like use Remasys or whatever, but I'm not. If that's all you're doing, then that's probably all you really need to do. Let's get into Raphael Silverstone's question. What career are you in and the job that you do outside of YouTube? What are your general interests in technology and gaming? He also says that, thanks for all you do and congratulations on the 2K. Appreciate the congrats. So my generic job, it depends on how you want to look at it. I have a couple different jobs. I have what I would consider a side hustle, which would be I'm the tech guy for the family, but I also get tech gigs from friends of the friends of the friends who I've helped. So there's that. There's this, but this is just stuff that I do because I enjoy it. My actual job, that is the one that pays the bills, as it were, is I am a retail manager for a company around where I live. That's that particular question answered. What are your general interests in technology and gaming? General is kind of vague, but I mean, whatever. My general interest as it relates to technology, is the experimentation, the discovery nature of it. I enjoy oddball hardware, as an example. A lot of people will poke fun at the various hardware that I've used. As an example, those machines up there are Jide Remix Ultra tablets. For those that don't know what those are Remix OS tablets. I use those because I like odd hardware. It's an ARM-based Surface clone that runs a desktop-fied version of Android. It's an interesting take, and I find it intriguing to use. I don't always enjoy the experience of, typing on a phone all day, so I would actually like a keyboard, and there are certain aspects that I enjoy about having the bigger screen, the actual keyboard function. There are certain things, like for me to write on that using something like WPS Office is a world saver compared to this kind of thing. Companies that take chances is what I like. I have a Sony Vaio Duo, which is a slider ultrabook from like 2012, 13, 14 time. Just, I enjoy technology that's different. I have an HP touchpad that I still use WebOS on. I have the BlackBerry Playbook back there that I use as like a infotainment center for my car, because it's got like 64 gigs of local storage, so put a crap ton of songs on it. There's just a lot of stuff that I like that, because it's not the same. It's not like in this case, like, because I have the OnePlus 7T. It's not the same slab running the same thing, slightly different. Because like, if you actually looked at my Android phone as an example, you would see that my start screen is very, very different from a lot of people. It's one of those things where I can appreciate companies trying to do different stuff. So that exploration into that is why I like it so much. As far as gaming, I just enjoy stories. I enjoy good stories. I enjoy different stories. I don't care about very Tolkien stories. That's why one of my videos I talk about how I'm not a fan of a lot of Western RPGs because it's very Tolkienish. It's very the same. It's very elves and fantasy and swords and sorcery crap. Just not my thing. The only one that I really enjoyed, which was the Witcher games, because it's a very different take on the swords and sorcery stuff. Uh, that is probably the only game that I actually enjoyed that was kind of in that sphere of like Western design. That to me matters. Then there are games that will go and do just different stuff. They take elements of like the choose your own adventure books from back, when books were a thing and we were kids, or I was a kid specifically, and you can kind of merge that with a movie and you get the interactive nature. Like I enjoy games like Until Dawn. I enjoy games like Detroit. I enjoy games like Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls, but I also enjoy just straight up games. My gaming preferences are story heavy. I like gameplay. There are games that are story heavy that have gameplay. One of them it would be probably Spec Ops: The Line or Singularity, that are very story focused, but the concept is very you run around and you shoot people in the face. That's the story of the game. Like there's more to it, but like that's the gameplay arc, and I don't always enjoy that. So kind of like in my tech, I enjoy companies who try different things. That's why I enjoy those quote unquote David Cage type games or JRPGs, because they don't conform to a certain standard. They're trying things, and that to me is really, really fun to look at. Next up, we have Tyro. What are your personal favorite KDE and GDK themes? I'm assuming you mean Qt themes or Plasma themes. When it comes to Plasma, it is point blank. I pretty much usually default to whatever dark theme is available. If it's Breeze Dark, it doesn't really matter. I'm not very picky on a dark theme. I can't do light themes because any like really bright whites, they just hurt my eyes too much. As far as GK themes, I usually go with like Arc Darker or Arc Darkest if I can find it. That's just me though. Not a lot of people. But there are other customizations and stuff that I do that I don't really generally talk about. I did a KDE Plasma video that I showed like some of the customizations that I do. One of the things that I customize is actually the fonts. I find most generic fonts on most distros to be trash. Just this is personal experience and personal preference, so take that for what it is. But for me, I think the best font, hands down, is Ubuntu Condensed, and Canonical does not get enough credit for contributing that and making that widely available. Once you have used that for a certain length of time, you cannot go back to any of the other fonts that are available in Linux. I'm sorry. That's just my personal opinion, of course. The icon sets I kind of jump back and forth on. There's one that I'm testing out called Contemporary. Doesn't have a lot of the more esoteric, some of the more esoteric apps that I use, which hit or miss. Generically, I use one called Obsidian because it does have more full featured icon support as far as like what apps and stuff will use it. But generically, those are pretty much the two that I fall into. I like Obsidian more probably because it doesn't fall into that flat material design crap that everybody else uses. I'm one of these guys that like I'm not a contrarian, but I just like different things than like what's the popular thing. Kind of weird. I have an opinion. I have preferences. I just don't force them down people's throats. So yeah, those are some of the things that I would like about like my personal favorite GDK and Plasma stuff. Jazz Bun 2, what was your original reason for getting into Linux and making videos? Getting into Linux again is kind of that I just like to not use or have this same take on everybody. Um, that's really, you know, I've been a Linux user on and off. I was using Linux as it's the secondary system kind of thing since like '99. But the primary system since about 2012 when the video editors and Steam became available and we didn't have really bad drivers. Let's be honest. That's when I really was able to flip the switch and do all of my video production and everything else in Linux. That's when it was available to me. But yeah, so that was kind of my reason getting into Linux. As far as making videos, the level of dumb when it comes to people talking about, not just if we're talking Linux videos, that's the whole concept behind the reaction videos. I don't go seeking the stupid. I just comment on the stupid if it's there. And if they're looking for knowledge or questions, or you know, I'll try to answer them or point them in a direction or suggest a community. That's kind of what it is. My mouth, unfortunately, just kind of gets in front of me when I see it, I am presented with stupid, hence the reaction portion. So I just figured, screw it. But no, then there was the fanboyism back in the time when I started making videos. A lot of people don't know this, but I've been making videos since 2008. And one of my first videos was PC versus Mac versus Linux, or Linux versus whatever. It was a long time ago. And that video has not aged well as far as quality. Calling it a potato is doing injustice to the potato. So it was just fanboyism that kind of grated on my nerves, where it's like, or you can just talk about what you know and use that. And that's fine. But because like I said, I got into making YouTube videos around the time of the whole, oh, it's a Mac, it's a PC, it's all that crap. And at the end of the day, I got kind of tired of hearing people talk about the third option, and as it were, in Linux, and it was just like, y'all are stupid. You know what I mean? You're not even trying the thing. And that's really where that kind of came in, because even in these early videos, I didn't talk about stuff that I didn't use or had not used. I'd used Mac OS 10 at the time. I had used Windows. I'd used specifically Ubuntu at that time. So I at least talked and tried to talk knowledgeably about both. And that's always been a sticking point with me, that I don't talk about things I don't know about. And it's that early mentality that I've always carried over, because I think it's a core importance to me that I keep that aspect, because a lot of people talk, but a lot of people talk dumb shit sometimes, and we all do. I'm just as guilty of talking stupid shit just as much as the next person. But what really matters is the ability to talk, at least, not even if it's not fully knowledgeable, with enough clarity in what you're saying, so that the people who do like really know the intricacies about stuff can actually understand what you're trying to say. And that's what a lot of people don't do. So that's kind of like why I started making videos around Linux. And the gaming stuff as well, I've always been a gamer. It's just been my shtick. So let's see. What's Tregotech asks, what's your current Linux distribution and Windows Manager /DE? That changes on depending on the machine. I view Linux in a very appliance mentality, and that's just the way I view things. I kind of have the Unix mentality. Do one job, do it well. If you do other things, cool, but that's not your primary job. And that's really what it matters most to me. So for me, example, appliance, gaming machine. This machine runs Salient OS with Plasma. Only thing I worry about keeping up to date on that machine is really drivers and that kind of stuff. Steam, obviously, and the other core importance that relate to gaming. A lot of the product content creation stuff that Salient usually ships with, I strip out. That's just a personal preference. This particular machine, which all my editing is actually done on, is a EliteBook A760W that runs Manjaro, but I'm running Plasma with it. But the actual environment that I do a lot of my work in is, well, three technically. You have Plasma, which I use. You have one called the Shell, and you have another called the Desk. The Shell is the original is the prototype for the Desk, which is the newer version and continuation of the Shell. I generically don't like running kind of beta-ish software on a production machine, especially on that kind of production machine. But I run those because the dependency requirement isn't really that high, because I have to build it from the AUR. The dependency requirement isn't that high given all the Qt libraries and stuff that Manjaro that I use pulls down anyway. So it's not adding a lot to the system. And that's really what mattered to me. So there's that. But I also have a ThinkPad that's running Ubuntu Unity. I have a HDPC that's down there that I run. What is that running? I believe that is currently running. I don't even remember because honestly, I don't even remember because that has a one-use mentality. That is an HTPC that boots directly into Kodi. So I guess the UI would be Kodi. I think that no, the base is Arch. I do know the base is Arch because I wanted the constant updates to Kodi. But as far as what the actual UI underneath is, I don't honestly remember. So yeah, like I said, it all depends on the system. It all depends on the machine. I take a very appliance mentality to it. That's just how I use computers. Like, you have a function, do it well. That's all I care about. Secondary stuff doesn't matter. It's nice, but it's not your primary function. Okay, so John Kadai asks, when it comes to talking to people in the Linux community, what would be the best way of sharing points of view in different topics of technology, the Linux OS, the FOSS thing, tech, etc.? Otherwise, that's all I can think of. Congrats on the 2K subs. Oh, that's a lot of topics. When it comes to talking to the people in the Linux community, know your audience. Now, I'm not going to claim to be the most civil person. I never have. My channel trailer is very clear about the type of content I make. For me, when it comes to interacting with the community, know your audience. If you are playing in somebody else's sandbox, expect to play by somebody else's sandbox's rules. That's very simple. So if I go into, say, the Big Daddy Linux Live community, I'm not going to go in as I would with my channel content, where I'm very free-flowing with my speech and very uncaring as far as what I would say. But that's out of respect for the community. That's out of respect for people in it, even those that I might disagree with. And that's totally fine. What I find is there are times, however, you do have to, as much as people hate it, have to have that Linus Torvalds approach where being really, really, really blunt is the only way to get the point across. And sometimes that makes you look like a jackass. Unfortunately, in my case, if you watch enough of those reaction videos that are the bad ones, I come across as a really big jackass. And that is totally fine if that's your perception of me. I totally get it. But if we're talking about different topics of technology and the Linux OS, and listen to what they're saying. Look for the context of what they're saying. I'm very sarcastic, and I will, example, like I rag on GNOME a lot because a lot of my in-joke with GNOME is, so what features did you decide to take away this release? because the joke is like they don't add things, and it's not because they don't appreciate the work. It's just because every time you hear something, they totally botch the PR for it. Looking at you, icons on the desktop. I'm looking at you, various other things like, oh, we're going to make it so you can't run app images from the file browser. It's stuff like that. So while I might poke fun at them, it's done in a sarcastic way to run a point across that are like, hey, this is stupid. Did you actually did you actually look at the different point of view or the different use cases? And a lot of the times the answer is no. But even with my criticisms of GNOME, people who find that workflow useful or works for them, cool. I want to hear why. And if it works for them, awesome. There'll be times where I'll be like, oh, cool. I'll try it. Then there are other times where it's like, okay, I've used this for 2 weeks and it just doesn't work for me. So listening is really a big thing. Where's the FOSS thing? This is going to get me a load of crap. Free and open source software, Libre software, yada yada. You lost the PR battle. Get over it. Oh, you don't have to pay for it. It's not about gratis software, you morons. If you find a piece of software useful, contribute. How you contribute does not just mean financially. If you make money from that program, contribute financially. Not all the programs are going to have donations and all the other stuff. And I get it. Contribute with bug reports, contribute with documentation, translations, whatever. Just contribute. If you find something useful, an application, a distro, whatever, contribute. And don't always rely on the 4 freedoms and all the other crap. Because at the end of the day, these are tools to get work done. Your job is to sell the tool while not being the tool. And unfortunately, when it comes to the FOSS thing, a lot of the FOSS ideologues are tools. That's kind of my take on that. The Linux OS is, you sell it like I don't want to say you sell it. You present it as like, hey, this might work for you. If it doesn't, whatever. You don't force feed it down their throat. People do not engage well when you force feed, especially an ideology, down their throat, or tell them how evil or stupid or dumb they are as far as an ideology or a technology choice. Now, I know the irony in me saying that, given the fact that I've had plenty of videos having me call people dumb, stupid, dumbasses and head shoved up asses and all the other stuff. The difference there is they are already presenting themselves as such. Big difference. They're not presenting an ideology, they're presenting knowledge as why. So again, for me, that's kind of how I deal with a lot of that stuff. I think that answers your question. I hope. So last one, Mikey, I am not even going to attempt to pronounce your last name because I butcher stuff bad enough. So your question is, as a Linux user, ... how do you say ... main services? How do you say main services? For example, I use most of Google services while being a Linux user and stay away completely from Windows and Microsoft. I use plenty of services. I use WPS Office and I use the cloud syncing stuff that it uses because it gets me away from Google Drive. I like to rely not specifically on one company. That's generically my take for when it comes to mainstream services. Netflix, Spotify, Amazon, take your pick. Like, there are aspects like, yes, I'm a Prime member. It depends on what you're willing to give up. at the end of the day, when it comes to mainstream services, you have to understand what you're giving up, and that's a call only you can make. I do the only time I find it ironic is when people bitch, whine, complain, and talk all about privacy, and they switch to Linux, but the immediate thing they're doing is going to Google for everything, and I mean everything. And I'm not saying it's an all or nothing. What I'm saying is you can't preach one thing, then your use case and your uses are totally the opposite of what you're preaching at for about other people that they should be doing. As an example, I'm no big fan of Windows 10. I don't like the idea of basically having a keylogger considered a quality life improvement application or a feature. That's garbage to me. But I can't really slag on Microsoft all that much about it. As far as if I'm using Windows 10, that's just part of Windows 10. Because if I'm that Linux user and I make the switch from Windows 10 to Linux, awesome. But then I run to Google and they're basically doing the same damn thing just with the internet. If you use, my favorite one is you talk about running away from Microsoft, but then people go and use Chrome. So you're using the web browser from the world's biggest ad agency. Like, I'm not going to judge you based on that, but you can't help but find it a little ironic. So for me, yes, I use mainstream services, and the browser I use on every platform is Opera because it has certain features and functions that I like, that I need, and I don't have to go jump through a lot of hoops to make them work. So yeah, there are plenty of mainstream services that I use. I use Spotify, I use Netflix, I use a lot of stuff. Do I rely solely on Google? No. I have a Gmail account. I have other accounts. Obviously, if I'm on YouTube, at the time when I made this, Gmail was kind of a requirement, is what it was as far as this channel. But my main archive of email is Proton Mail. Like, that's what I use. I prefer Proton Mail. My main use of communication is like Telegram. I don't use WhatsApp. Just not my thing. Like, I get why people use certain things. Yes, I use Facebook Messenger because there are a ton of my family members that use it. So, and they live all across the freaking country, and none of them use fucking Telegram. So I go where they are, regardless of whether or not I like it. So there are ways to still be pseudo private and do what you can on your end, but I'm not gonna lambaste everybody for using mainstream services, because at the end of the day, again, these are tools, these are outlets, these are ways to communicate, etc. It's your choice on how that happens. So if somebody lambasts you for it, for deciding to use Facebook, that's your prerogative. I'm not saying it's the best choice, and I would say understand what you're signing up for when you go to these mainstream services, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to tell you that it's the wrong choice for you. I'm just going to say understand what you're potentially giving in order to use, because they are going to use you for you letting you use their product. Because really what it boils down to at the end of the day, it's not the product, the free product is not their goal. Their goal is for you to be the product. And that's what it boils down to. So again, I use Google. I also use DuckDuckGo. I also use, a myriad of other services. So just understand what you're signing up for and what the companies you are signing up for represent. And that's a choice you have to make, and trade-offs you have to either compromise or not compromise on. Totally your choice. So that's kind of where I stand with that. I'm not against mainstream services. I'm not against any of that. I'm not against proprietary software. I mean, like I said, I use WPS Office and Opera as my two proprietary apps. I use Steam. I use Spotify. Like, do as you do, but understand what you're willing to give up to do what you do. And if you're fine with it, cool. Who am I to fucking judge you? That's your choice. Just understand what you're giving up to do it. And we had one more, and this was from Twitter. This was from Lennox Paul. Why are you such an enabler? Because without me enabling you, Paul, you wouldn't be having nearly half the gaming experience, now would you? And with that answered, you guys know the drill. Comment, rate, subscribe. All the info for Andy Gala Patreon. All that crap's down below. Let's get to 5,000. We'll do another one. All right. Talk to you guys later. Peace.